Welcome to Conversations with Kurt. We appreciate everyone for joining us. We're going to be talking a little bit about the ORS Journals today. My name is Tim Mix. I'm Marketing Communications Manager with ORS. And joining us today, we have Sharon Smith-Terry, who's CEO with ORS, Paige Mooney, the Associate Marketing Specialist of ORS, Kurt Hankinson, President of ORS Board of Directors, Linda Sandell, Editor-in-Chief, Journal of Orthopedic Research, and Robert Malk, Editor of Journal of Orthopedic Research Spine. So thank you all for being here. We hope to get a lot of good information about the journals. I know we have some important journals that we put out through ORS, and we need to learn a little bit more about them. So Kurt, if you'd like to take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everybody, for being here. A happy fall as we roll into cold weather and Halloween. Baseball season's ending. It's ended for the Phillies, at least. We're into football. So thanks for being here to talk about the journals. So I just wanted to maybe give a brief history of the journals. It's great to have Rob and Linda here as respective editors of the two journals that we have. So whether the ORS actually owns two journals. The first is the Journal of Orthopedic Research, and then JOR Spine. The Journal of Orthopedic Research was actually founded in 1983. So sort of well after ORS had been founded and had been an active meeting. The journal was founded in 83 by Wayne Atkinson from UCSD from San Diego, and then Toby Hayes at Harvard. So they were the first co-editors. And I think in that first year, there was something like less than 50 papers published. And Linda later can tell us a little bit about where we are now for publications per year. And, before the age of the internet, the journal, which was only in print, obviously, at that time, was the prime mechanism through which the organization really communicated with its members on a monthly basis. And then it then became this journal that published the highest impact papers in the field of musculoskeletal biology. And so it still really has that place in the field where it's the premier journal for publishing sort of overall musculoskeletal basic biology. And then JOR Spine, represented by Rob here, was first published in 2018. It basically was kicked off in 2017. So it's a pretty new journal. It was founded in the age of the internet. And so it's an open access journal. And its founding editors were Mauro Alini, who was from Switzerland, Rob Malk, and then Daisuke Sakai. And those three remain the editors. The founders, when it was founded, which was in my time, they recognized that there was a niche in the field for having a journal that was focused on basic and translational spine and spine-related research. So while there were journals focused on the spine, they were more clinically oriented. And so the journal's been, I think, a smashing success, as Rob can talk about. In 2021, it became fully indexed in PubMed Central and Scopus. And then in PubMed and Medline. And then in 2022, and Rob can correct me if this is wrong, they received their first official impact factor, which we'll talk a little bit about what that means, from the Science Citation Index expanded group. So I think maybe the only other thing I wanted to say about the journals as we get started was the journals are actually overseen by an independent board that has a sort of a reporting relationship to the board of directors. And so the publication advisory board is chaired by Hisham Drisi at Emory. He's the current PAB chair, and then there's several other members of the PAB as well, and they're responsible for overseeing the journal.
Great. Linda, can you tell us what kind of articles are being submitted to JOR?
Linda, you're
muted.
I didn't want you to hear my coffee grinding. The articles that are submitted to JOR, basically, we say the same as could be published in the ORS meeting. So it covers the same range of material, and that is our biggest challenge. The JOR has a very large breadth of topics, and satisfying all of these topics is sort of a large task. So one of the first things that we did when I became editor-in-chief was to categorize things within the journal. So cartilage people could see where the cartilage papers are, and tendon and ligament people could see where those papers are, and spine people could see where those papers are. And it really has helped a lot in people feeling that they're more closely associated with the journal. So we publish primarily research, and the area that we sort of stay away from are clinical papers. We don't publish anything that's a case study. We don't publish anything with a very low N number. But if someone has a good clinical study, that's relevant to everyone in the organization, we will publish it. But I would say in terms of papers that we reject for just being out of scope, it's probably the more clinically oriented papers the most. But otherwise, we publish anything that can be presented at the meeting. And we take our cue from the meeting, too. So a lot of our reviews and other kind of emphasis, like special issues, are taken from what the board feels is important at the meeting. And then it's presented at the meeting, and then we like to reflect that in the journal.
Great. And same question for Rob. What kind of articles are you seeing submitted to the journal? You're muted.
Right. So as Kurt mentioned, JOR Spine is really just a babe in the woods relative to JOR and its illustrious history. But when the journal was founded, it was really founded on this idea that there wasn't a great home internationally for basic and translational research of the spine. There, of course, were these longstanding spine journals, but they tended to be heavily dominated and driven by clinical papers. And so ORS and led by efforts of the spine group in ORS really motivated for a new journal that would address what was seen as a empty space in the publishing literature. So we founded JOR Spine in 2017, and we've tried to stay true to that starting ethos that we want to publish the very best basic and translational research in the area of spine. As Kurt mentioned, we've been growing up over the last 6 years, and recently were awarded an impact factor. And that really changes a journal when that happens. And so the number of submissions have risen dramatically for JOR Spine. But as Linda noted, and perhaps struggles with too, a lot of these that are coming in tend to be out of scope. And so what we've seen more recently in terms of papers that aren't successful at JOR Spine, they're largely directed towards a more clinical audience, and so outside the scope really of what the core mission of JOR Spine is.
Great, thank you very much.
Tim,
just wanted to mention. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Tim. Sorry for interrupting. I wanted to ask maybe. I was curious to ask Linda, and maybe Rob can comment on this too. I mean, Linda, does JOR still receive submissions on spine related work, or do those all end up at JOR Spine, or do they automatically sent to JOR Spine?
Currently, we review the spine papers that are submitted to us. And if we feel that it is not appropriate for the JOR, then we have an actual tab that we can refer it directly to JOR Spine. So everything can flow. If we've reviewed it, it can go right to JOR Spine. If we haven't reviewed it, we have another tab that can go right to JOR Spine. So we do have a flow that if we don't publish it in the JOR, it can be considered by the JOR Spine. But we are still taking spine papers, and we still have a spine associate editor, Jim Kang.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, great.
And sort of reciprocally, we get articles occasionally that are outside our scope, but as Linda said, some of the real cutting edge, impactful clinical studies that are not within JR spine domain, we might suggest to an author, that's really not our mission, but we know that this is a great paper and JR might consider it. So we can port as well to JR. So
that's great.
It's interesting that we've always published 2 or 3 spine articles out of our 21 articles that we publish every month. 2 or 3 are generally in spine. So it hasn't changed the ones that we get or that we publish in the JOR. They just get another recruitment of spine articles. So I think it expands the spine field as far as the ORS is concerned.
Yeah. And I think captures more of it. One of the analyses we did when we were launching was one of our young investigators, a guy named John Martin, did this analysis. It was all the papers that were published in the general field of spine that would fit within the mission of JOR spine, and where were they? And so rather than sort of competing with JOR, it was seen as a way to sort of bring these papers into a home that might be appearing in a biomaterials journal or in an osteoarthritis journal or something different than providing a new home, a new place to send their work. So
yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Just wanted to note, if anyone has any comments or questions, just post them in chat or raise your hand and we can get to you. In the meantime, this one is for everybody that would care to answer. What kind of guidance would you give to members that would like to submit an article to the journals for publication? Anything that you're looking for or anything to avoid?
I guess I can begin in a general way. Well written, pay attention to the guidelines. Of course, the study should be well done and well presented. We don't look for anything specific. We don't have an axe to grind or anything in any specific area. But the papers that we reject tend to fall down in one of those areas. The study isn't good enough. The presentation isn't good enough.
Yeah, I would echo that and just add for JR spine specifically that the other category is, of course, does it fit the mission? So, and when we do desk reject papers for mission, and I should say I'm speaking on behalf of Mauro Alini and Dai Sakai, who are the co-editors in chief. When we do desk reject, it's not something that we take lightly. And so typically we will have a dialogue amongst the co-editors to think about, like, does this fit scope? And really it's a considered decision that, we really can't have this in our journal. And so then a lot of times if it's a paper that's of high quality, we'll send the authors a note that says, this is really great, but it's not our scope. So either consider JOR or some other more clinically focused journal. So really it's about mission scope, I guess.
Robert, can you describe the open access nature of the journal?
Yeah, right. So this is something that's, slightly different than JOR. In that everything we publish is open access, and in the changing climate and requirements that certain regions and institutions have for open access, some people sort of prefer JOR spine in that way. So everything that we publish, as soon as essentially the proofs are done copy editing, get posted on JOR spine website and become immediately available in a full text fashion, really to the world. It does then take some time for it to get posted on PubMed. We've gone through many of the hurdles that we need to get to in terms of establishing the journal and all the credentialing. The last one that we need to get through is the Medline indexing step. So our journals our articles appear on PubMed after they've published in an issue rather than immediately. And so that's a small difference between JOR and JOR spine at the moment. but yeah, everything is full text open access from the day it's available from the authors for corrected proofs, and that's actually really great for the journal. And we track a lot of different metrics. One of them that I'm always very excited by is the full text downloads, and so this year we're on track to have over 100,000 full text downloads. For the first time ever. So we're really quite excited about, everything is free, everything is available, and people really are downloading and reading the work in J.R. Spine. So
let me make a comment about the JOR. That a lot of people don't realize JOR is actually a hybrid journal.
Right.
So you can publish open access in the JOR. When I first came, I thought that the publishing standard should be everything available after a year. So we only embargo for a year, and that's standard in hybrid journals. However, if you want to publish open access, you can. And I don't know if our costs are any different than yours, Rob's. I've never really looked into it. But about a third of our papers are open access because they might be from Europe and required to be open access. And if they're not published and if they're not supported by the NIH, sometimes there's support and a requirement for open access. So the movement is towards more open access. A lot of universities, I think Duke might be one, but don't quote me on that, where they actually have a fund to help people pay for open access. And all that would mean for the JOR is that instead of being embargoed for the first year, it's available from the very beginning. And of course, all of our early view are available, and they get embargoed when it's published in an issue. So that's considered to be a hybrid model.
Can we talk about the impact factors of the journals, what that means, their acceptance rates, readership, etc.?
Okay, I'll go first again. The impact factor has changed a bit. We're very happy. We lose our audience. We were very happy at the increase in impact factor over the last 10 years. But a few years ago, I think maybe 2 or 3, I'm not sure how long that's been. Maybe Rob knows a little bit more definitively. The way that papers are available for calculation in impact factor changed. And that is, as soon as it's available in early view, your clock starts to tick. So a paper only has 2 years to be included in an impact factor for the subsequent year. So it used to be when it was published in the journal and available to everyone by journal, that's when the clock started. Now the clock starts as soon as it's published online. Now, we don't have a mechanism for publicizing our early view publications. And maybe that's something that should be considered, Kurt, by the organization, that we need to start marketing our journals as soon as the papers appear online. And that's a dribble thing. That happens as the paper's ready to be put online, but not when it's in the journal. So everybody expected the impact factor to go down once this 2-year period hit the next year, that it would be considered in the impact factor. I hope that makes sense. So our impact factor has gone down from 3.7 to 3 because of this change. That's what the publisher is telling us. We don't really have any control over those things. But just let me say very simply that impact factor is the number of citations, number of citations you have divided by the number of papers, the number of recitable papers. So it's a very simple thing. You've got 1,000 citations and 200 papers, then it's just 1,000 divided by 200. So it's still the best known and easiest to calculate factor. And hopefully we'll stay where we are now. The journal has always been, since it's been mature, between 2.5 and our highest has been 3.7. And then, so you have a 2-year impact factor and a 5-year impact factor. So the 5-year is a little bit higher than the 2-year. I think that's all I'm going to say about that. I don't want to get in the weeds any further. Go ahead, Rob.
The comment about, just real quick, sorry, Rob, I just wanted to say the comment about publicizing articles sooner, is that essentially what you were suggesting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess
since the count starts when available, the sooner we'll know about a paper.
Usually post on ORS Connect what's been posted in early view that month. It's not papers, and people get a chance to look at them before they actually appear compiled into an issue.
Yeah.
And citations are no longer by issue.
Right.
So
Paige, is that Paige, when are those things, when do they go on social media? When they're published or in the early view? Do you know?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Tim. Thank you.
We get regular notices from the journals about articles that are published, and those are sent to be posted on social, to the social media committee and Paige, and those are posted on social.
Yeah. And I have to say, the social media committee for the ORS has been doing really a wonderful job of promoting. As an editor for JR Spine, I know that it's having an impact on the visibility of our journal, and publishing a lot in JOR, I also see it impacting JOR as well. So I think that's a great initiative, and it seems like it's really paying a dividend.
This is sort of a paradigm shift, because publishing looks at publishing differently than we do, who are used to traditional publishing where we actually can see a journal and leaf through it. Their publishing begins as soon as their production is finished, and that's publication. When we consider publication is once it's compiled into an issue and we can cite it, put the pages are and all that kind of thing. That is old school. That is not the way the publishing industry looks at publishing now. And that's a shift we really, I don't think, have successfully integrated.
I can speak to the JR Spine impact factor if you'd like. So we last year were awarded our first impact factor. We were all very excited, and then frankly relieved this year when it came in at basically the same as the previous year. So it's sitting around a 3.7. We did benefit, unlike JOR, which had this issue of how the ISI changed the way they counted, right? And so they had to deal with that transition. For us, we just started, and we didn't have that sort of shift in how they were counting impacting us. So it's I think a great impact factor for a journal like JR Spine. It's a 1, 2, 2, I think, in the general spine field. So it's a place where I think people really can send their very best work and make sure that it's being seen. And for me, Mauro and Di and I talk about this a lot. It's important to have an impact factor, because in some academic groups, that is still the very metric by which promotions and all sorts of other things related to professional life are judged. But it's also changing a lot. And so as much as we like to talk about impact factor, the metric that I care really most about is, are people reading our papers? And so if we can really get to 100,000 downloads, which we're well on track to do this year, to me, that's the real metric of success is, are you publishing things that your community wants to read? And that to me is the most important. Yeah.
The number of downloads has been extraordinary. And we at first thought, well, maybe it's a robo download or something like that, but they appear to be real downloads, and they're all over the world. It's hard to reflect that in actual citations, though. So we look at both. But I wanted to mention that the JOR is cited by a lot of other journals, and we have a statistic that we get every year it's what we cite as authors in the JOR, and then who cites us. So we tend to cite things in biomechanics, JOR, shoulder and elbow, the regular orthopedic journals. But who cites us is Frontiers in Bioengineering and Biotechnology, of course, the JOR, International Journal of Molecular Sciences, Scientific Reports, Musculoskeletal Disorders, American Journal of Sports Medicine, Frontiers in Cell and Developmental Biology. So we're reaching quite far, and I was a little surprised at that. So if we do a developmental paper in the JOR, it is seen by the developmental biology literature. So that's it's nice information to have on hand, that that it's not being isolated to just, and this is probably one of the advantages of doing it online, that it's not just people in the society that open the journal and leaf through it.
I wonder, Linda, I mean, that's an interesting point, and wonder how much that has changed over time. The cited by journals has become broader than maybe just in the, musculoskeletal field.
That's an interesting question. I think I could answer that, because when I applied for the editor-in-chief position 10 years ago, I did the same analysis. So we can see what it was 10 years ago, and we can see what it is now. And I can go back and look and see if there's a difference.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Right, to see if I wonder a little bit, like, has been the changing nature of our work as it's become maybe in the field more mechanistic. And so those mechanistic papers are then more broadly, applicable to fields outside of musculoskeletal biology.
It could be, but don't ever forget that we are so broad.
Yeah.
We have such a huge range of kinds of papers that it might be hard to say that, but I'm sure that the data's out there.
Yeah.
Are there any topics that are particularly hot right now in each of these journals?
Infection is very hot for us. Any of the particular groups like cartilage or tendon and ligament, we've actually taken advantage of hot topics by instituting special issues. So about once a year, we have a special issue on a specific topic, and those are very highly cited. They're also recruited from a very top-notch group of investigators. So the papers tend to be have a high acceptance rate, but also they're very highly cited. So we found that has been an interesting way to take advantage of what people are most interested in. And we've had them on a wide range of topics, and you can pull down in the browser on the website all the different special issues and take a look at them. We'll have one coming up on infection with consensus papers. And then we'll have one coming out on tendon, pretty much tendon again.
Yeah. So I think the hot topics in JOR spine reflect but are spine focused, sort of the hot topics in JOR. The one additional one that seems to be coming up quite a lot, as you might guess, is AI. And so especially as it relates to diagnosis and analysis and sort of interpretation of data. That's been I've seen an uptick in that over the last small number of months. We also do special issues. Our special issues so far have been either one, to sort of support the spine community in ORS, and especially by running special issues related to the PSRS ORS symposia, the international one that's held every other year. And that's a great way to sort of highlight some of the very best work done in the spine community. Our other special issues have been directed towards regions. So we did a China special issue and a Japan special issue so far, and have others sort of in the queue. And those were really meant to highlight, there's a lot of spine research going on internationally, and we really want this journal to be an international home and hub for the very best spine research. So these were sort of outreach efforts to both acknowledge and recognize and celebrate, the great work that was going on in regions that may or may not have navigated to our journal as quickly had we not done that outreach.
You mentioned AI, and Alice Wang, who's from our Publications Advisory Board, actually wanted to delve into that topic a little bit, if you guys could, about the AI and the challenges and opportunities the EICs foresee in the context of academic publishing.
Yeah, so Di and a couple of colleagues just, I think it's slated for this issue, wrote a small opinion piece on ChatGPT and its role and its sort of strengths and weaknesses relative to using it as a tool for helping authors with the assembly of papers. And so I would encourage folks to have a look at Di's opinion piece on that matter. What he found, what he and his colleagues found, was that things like ChatGPT can be really helpful and should be seen as a constructive tool, but they should only be seen as a tool. And the warning I think that Di provided in his analysis was he'd asked it to help me identify some references related to X, Y, or Z. And it pulled, I think, 5 references, but I think 3 out of the 5 were wrong or not on the topic. So there's, I think what we're seeing is this technology that's really in its infancy, and we should recognize that it's not a finished product. It can be a help, an aid in thinking and brainstorming, but ultimately, really, it needs to be viewed with a little bit of skepticism and needs to be validated by the end user. So,
and I don't know if you pulled it up, Tim, but we had an editorial in the JOR, and neither one of us know when that was. And I know that we worked on it over a year ago. So when it was actually published, I'm not sure. But we have a statement about it. We review it a little bit. I think that that Di's is going to be a little more recent with a little more experience, but ours was published with core clinical and related research, orthopedics clinical and related research, and the JBJS and the British JBJS. And we all published this together. And what we essentially said there was that we would like people to acknowledge whether they've used ChatGPT or if they've used another AI program. We are not requiring it in the authors, although some journals are going to that, actually requiring that ChatGPT be used as an author, so that at least there's awareness of it. And I agree with Rob, it could be helpful to some people. One of our biggest problems is language. So people don't have English as the first language might be able to benefit from it. I don't think it can meet the hurdle, though, of requiring that they have someone who actually is trained in publishing in English go over it. And then, of course, for data and citations, I hope people don't rely on it. So we might have to be more specific. I haven't seen anyone cite it yet, but we might have to be more specific about exactly what aspect of the paper involved artificial intelligence.
Yeah. And then
sorry, Rob, go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say, but to speak to the sort of scientific applications of AI, one of the things that JR Spine did that I'm actually really quite proud of is they got everybody in the field together to come up with a scoring system, histopathologic scoring systems for spine across species. And Chitra Daya and a bunch of people led the mouse one, and they spent a long time in their analysis not implementing AI, but talking about how the future implementation of AI for some of these manual scoring things really is something we as a field will need to address, test, validate, and then hopefully deploy to make some of these outcomes that we're doing more rigorous and reproducible. So I think there's a lot of exciting things that are going to happen in the next decade as we validate and then deploy some of these technologies. Sorry, Kurt, go ahead.
I was, and I agree with that, Rob, from a technical perspective. I mean, we're using it, already, right, in micro CT to analyze, bone formation, the bone mass, that sort of thing, right, and trying to adapt that and like fracture healing. But I'm sort of curious about sort of ChatGPT as an author, as Linda said, and whether is there like a greater likelihood if you use ChatGPT of basically plagiarizing? I mean, I guess I'm not sure exactly how the algorithms work, but it seems like there was this opportunity for there to be text harvested, essentially from other sources, and I'm not familiar enough with the field to know if those are concerns, but it is an interesting question, right, to know whether it would be more prone to plagiarism.
Yeah. And sorry, Linda, go ahead.
I was going to say that would go into the system like any other plagiarism. We have authenticate that every paper is subjected to now, that it's easier to do, and that will flag. It should flag anybody using the same verbiage, and it, maybe 20% is acceptable because sometimes methods are repetitive between different papers. Anything over that, and even if it's 20%, I'll take a look at it and see, is it in the discussion or is it in the methods, or where is the overlap? So I think that particular part should be picked up by authenticate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Just whether
I would assume so too. Yeah.
And it's not just journals that are struggling with this. I think the whole academic enterprise is struggling with this. And so, here at my university this fall, when courses began, they sent out a bunch of links to online resources for instructors to evaluate submitted documents. And there are now sniffers that can identify, based on patterns, whether this was an AI generated text or whether the probability that this was an AI generated text or not. We haven't started talking about that with respect to JR Spine, and I don't know that we have a strong consensus opinion on it yet. But it is something that I think, like authenticate, will probably become part of the standard journal editor's toolbox, going forward.
Yeah, I think whether it's obvious if they're using something like ChatGPT, but AI is everywhere, and it's in every algorithm that we're using. So how far we can go in investigating how people did their studies, and that's going to be up to evaluation of the study when it's presented to us. So I don't see a big change in that now. People can lie like people can always have been able to lie. And hopefully we'll see that.
Yeah.
The journals have always been in need of reviewers. What's involved in the process of reviewing, and how can members get involved to help the journals in that process?
Well, since COVID, it's become an even bigger problem. And we are going to address it at the annual meeting this year. People don't like to review outside their area, and it's very hard to get people to agree. But we've had problems getting good reviewers for a long time. It's not a new problem. It's just been magnified by COVID and people using their time differently. So we're going to hopefully solve it by increasing awareness of the problem and increasing the responsibilities that people have to the awareness of the responsibility that they have to their field of work, and hopefully be able to see if people can take a little more responsibility to do reviews. What I've found in looking at reviewers is it's the busiest people tend to be the best reviewers. I mean, it goes to the old adage that if you want to get something done, ask somebody who gets a lot of things done and is very busy. So it's just a matter of people spending time to do it. Do we have to elevate the prestige of being a reviewer? Maybe there's a few things that we can do. We've made a lot of assumptions that people just understand that if they're going to submit a paper, they need to review a paper. But I think maybe we need to do a little bit more than just make that assumption. And we try and reward our reviewers as much as possible. But I think a little bit more emphasis on that is going to be necessary.
Yeah. I mean, I would echo Linda 100%. It's become much harder to recruit reviewers. For J.R. Spine, in 2017, we had 11 submissions, and so far in 2023, we have 181. So for us, it's also a problem of, the three of us learning how to scramble and kind of keep everything going in a quick fashion, just based on the robust growth. But it's not uncommon for me to ask, more than, two handfuls of people in order to get, 3 quality reviews. And that usually involves chasing and pleading sometimes. So it is, it's just sort of what we have to do now as editors. And I know it's sometimes, I think, a frustration for submitters, right? Because they're like, my God, this has been, waiting for assignment forever. And really that's what's going on behind the scenes, is the three of us and Linda and her team really just trying to get the right number of reviewers who are going to do a good job of providing critical, constructive feedback on your work. But it's become more and more of a challenge. In terms of how to get involved, I'd say there are 2 principal ways that I would advocate people. 3, actually. One is reach out to us. We love volunteers, so reach out and say, I'm really interested. The second way is submit your work, because you're going to be top of mind with us. If we just handled one of your papers and it was awesome, then we get something along those lines, then we're going to think of you and say, this person would be awesome, to look at this other work. And then the third way I would do it, and this is particularly, I think, true for younger investigators who are just sort of starting in their career, is, use your network and your people who are mentors for you. Because the thing that a journal editor loves the most is not someone saying no, but someone saying, no, but these 3 people would be fabulous, And so I see that a lot, where maybe I've asked someone who's, further along in their career, and they're like, no, I'm too busy, Rob. But these 3 people who maybe were recent trainees of mine that are now out in their own independent careers would be great. And that's really helpful for me in identifying appropriate reviewers for it. So those would be my 3 pieces of advice.
The JOR requires over 4,000 reviews a year. And it's a huge number of reviews that we need. So what we've had to do is be very careful about what we send out for review. In other words, if we don't think the paper is going to be rejected, and I even do this as I look at things and assign them to associate editors, if I think that the English is not good, or that the study is not good, when I look at it, I'll assign it to myself and I will reject it immediately. So that's one level. So we save our reviewers as much as possible. The second level is, if we decided this a few years ago at a meeting with all the reviewers and Wiley, and everybody agreed on it, that if we can't get reviews, and after we've requested 7 reviewers, then I write a personal note in the rejection. Well, the rejection is because we cannot get appropriate reviewers. And I write to them personally and say, we have tried to get reviewers, we've used your suggested reviewers, we've used other reviewers. And then I conclude that maybe it's not appropriate for our journal, because I want to give them some nice reason. But if you can't, with 7 tries, find anyone who agrees to review it, you're not going to find it in the next 7. So we just have just decided to bite the bullet on this one and say that we cannot find appropriate reviewers. And then maybe they will pick another journal that is a little bit more appropriate for their paper. The hard thing.
Another consideration, and this is something that a somewhat related journal has just released a program for training reviewers, right? The idea being that that the pool of reviewers isn't big enough, right? Because you don't have enough people who have been trained how to do it, because it does take, as you both know as editors, it takes a lot of expertise to be able to do that, to be able to know how to effectively review a manuscript. And so I think that perhaps that's something, or as an organization, and with the 2 journals, that we could think about a little bit is, maybe how to expand the pool. Linda, you just said, 4,000 reviews for the year. That's how many you need. We have close to 3,000 members. It's, if each member, and it was to review, 2 papers, then we'd have enough reviewers for the entire journal, wouldn't we? And I'm sure what happens is you have, as you said, some reviewers, ORS members, probably are reviewing 20 plus a year, and then there's some that aren't doing any. And so maybe also as an organization, getting people to sort of understand that there's a role that we play as members in keeping the journals propped up and functioning well. That's also important, I think.
I think that is true, and I know that Tim and Sharon are working on this, and when we do the switch in editors, I think there'll be a lot of emphasis on this. And like I said, we'll have this workshop this year, and hopefully we can have people begin to be trained. I know we have a list of people who are interested, and probably those people are younger and will need training. As I mentioned before, Lisa Fortier has a training module and a trainer for all the veterinary journals, and you might have seen that through your veterinary life. And that's how we're going to have to tackle it. I call it grow your own.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Yeah, I did not know that for the veterinary journals. I mean, obviously I knew Lisa had taken over, but I didn't know that there was a training module, or that so they're paying a trainer.
I don't know if they pay this person. I think they might, but it's someone who's really excited about doing it and can light a fire under these young people that are interested in doing it. So
I think that's sort of an interesting model, right? I mean, we as senior PIs, we've all worked with our trainees to help them develop those skills, right? But that's been very then PI to PI dependent to provide that sort of training. Perhaps a way to think about this would be to develop a set of mentors, right, that could guide younger, or newer reviewers that are coming into the field. People that are very experienced. I don't know. Maybe that would be a role for the editorial board.
Yeah.
The workshop that we're envisioning for this year would be very similar to our mentors workshops that we've had for many years, where you have a cartilage person and people interested in cartilage sit around the cartilage table. Getting people to know each other is also very useful, because if you're anonymous, you can much more easily reject something than if you know the person. And I'm sure Rob has had the same experience. When I reach out, which I do quite often, I say to somebody, I really need your help in this review. And people will not say no to that. So a lot of it is interpersonal connections. And I think that the meeting can help stimulate a lot of that.
Yeah. I mean, right. It's a lot for the editor, editors or associate editors to have to manage it at that level. I mean, but I do think sometimes, obviously, that's what it takes from your side, right? Is that very personal touch?
In some way, that's the easiest thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's probably easier than reviewing the paper.
Yes, there you go. Well, there's only so many imaging papers I can review.
What's planned for the journals in 2024?
Well, I mean, I'll say from the JOR side, Linda mentioned that she will be stepping down after 10 years as the editor in chief, and we'll have a new editor who I don't think we have named officially yet, right, Sharon?
That's coming out next week.
Okay, it's coming out next week. So that'll be an important announcement. But this is, Linda's done an amazing job with the journal. Her service to the ORS has been incredible. Those of you who know, Linda was a past president as well. But we'll be turning the reins over. So that's exciting. The publication advisory board that I mentioned earlier, Hisham Drisis will be stepping down from chair. His term is up. He actually stayed an extra year for us to sort of negotiate both finding a new editor as well as a new contract with the publisher Wiley. So Hisham has been an amazing PAB chair, and now we'll have a new PAB chair next year as well. So that's two new things sort of happening at the administrative level. Other than that, I guess I don't know at the journal side. Rob and Linda, maybe you guys have some specific things coming up.
Well, the specific things for the JOR are our reviewer initiative, and then we have the special issues coming out. So we're reviewing the consensus infection papers now, and we're pretty much finished with the tendon, and that should be out any second if it's not already out. So that's what's looming right away. And then somebody had asked about awards, and we have the awards coming up that we'll be selecting pretty soon for presentation at the annual meeting.
Right, and the JOR awards, journal awards, are the Harris Award, right, which is hip related.
We don't own the Harris Award.
Okay. The Early Career Award, and then the Excellence, and 3 awards, and 1 in basic, 1 in clinical, 1 in translational science, right?
Right. Those are the ones created a few years ago with Wiley, and those we have a mechanism for selecting. The Harris Award, I think, is selected by, maybe you, I don't know who. And I think it's being selected now from HIP papers in the ORS, but it's, let's say, between us, kind of an orphan. Okay. And we're going to share and deal with it.
Yeah.
For you.
I don't think it's being selected by me, but that could be in my to-do list. Rob, you have a 1 award, right? The Early Career Award, right?
Correct. Yeah. And just to put a plug in, if anyone is watching this before October 30th, you still have time to apply. So we're still soliciting applicants for this year, and it's always a really exciting competition. So please do apply to the JR Spine Early Career Award.
And I'm Rob, is that based on a paper that somebody's been published in the last year?
Yeah, typically a paper published in JR Spine in the past year, they submit that along with a CV, and then we use the JR, the ORS Spine section, and the editors come together to help select a winner.
Great. And Rob, any other things coming up for you?
We have a very exciting special issue coming up in our December issue from the PSRS meeting, the last international PSRS meeting. It was our largest special issue collection to date. And then we have a number of things on the fire for next year as far as special issues and solicited content. So,
great.
Paige, can you talk about social media? Where can people find the journals, and what do they do on social media?
You're muted, Paige.
Thank you. You can stay up to date with the latest from the ORS Journals on LinkedIn and Twitter. So the journals are both active on social media and regularly post and publish highlights and other engaging topics. So I will put these links in the chat. You can follow, share, post, and engage with others in the orthopedic community.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. And that brings us right to the hour. So does anybody else have any comments or questions that we have not addressed yet?
I don't think so, Tim. This has been great. Thanks, Tim, for setting this up, and Paige and Sharon for being here. Rob and Linda, thanks for having a conversation with Kurt.
You're welcome, Kurt. It's our pleasure.
Pleasure, yeah.
Thank you all so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good day.